Thank you for having me. Well, guys, I am extremely excited to be here from New York. Good morning, back that afternoon. I do understand that I stand with you in an amazing, wonderful post event. So let's get to it. Now, many of you are probably in the room and you're asking yourself, okay, human-centric MarTech, what does it mean? And why here? Why now? Why today? This is something that has actually have been percolating and calling me for a while in terms of emphasis um, around my discipline of data strategy and MarTech, and as well as I think about the changes that are happening in the marketplace. And I just want to preface that I am not a data ethicist by training, by calling, but I am by function of just being in the digital ecosystem and beyond. So I'm not a data ethicist, but it is that important that as a data strategist and a MarTech specialist, I've become to understand and integrate it into my day-to-day practice. Today, more than ever, we're starting to see the automation of everything. And it's an exciting time. It's a moment in time and space where we are seeing not only our MarTech evolve and expand in great, amazing ways, but we see how marketing and the full supply is changing and accelerating greatly. And a lot of the things that we could do today, especially when we think about AI applications, were around for a very, very long time, as many of you already know. But what's the main catalyst for this, or the main catalyst why we're seeing this resurgence, this hype around topics in advancement in not only technology, but also in artificial intelligence is really our data. And what I'm always impressed by is this that in the next 3 years, we're going to be generating more data than we've ever done in a whole history of humanity, which is impressive and amazing. And this data is coming on not only structured data, ways that we were traditionally used to seeing, but in a more innovative, expansive way, where video and reading and understanding video and the metadata within video, search, images are really becoming the cornerstone of new innovation in the ecosystem. And that's paving the way for extremely complex MarTech. Now, what you see in front of you is a huge ecosystem around more than 11,000 companies representing everything, all the different players that touch data, that touch technology within our ecosystem. Many of your brands potentially are listed here if you're in the on the technology side. And if you don't see them, it's because it is huge. This is a marketplace that has evolved in the last 12 years alone. It has grown over 7,000%. And just year to year, if we compare this chart versus what we saw last year, that's a growth of 32% of technology. And this is not going to stop. In fact, my prediction in the next couple of years is going to be accelerated by the new growth of generative AI. And where we're seeing that it's not only expanding our capabilities of what we can do and how we can connect better with our customers, with our prospects, with our clients, but also is expanding the complexity of our full MarTech ecosystem. So what to do when you're faced with all these changes? The temptation is to go at the speed of change. The temptation is to go as fast as technology is moving. Expand what you're doing today, exploit what you're doing today, and think, if at all, about the consequences in the future. And the main provocation of today is that history has told us this Silicon Valley of move fast, break things, leaves us in a world of dichotomies. Now more than ever, we're facing this interesting intersect where, from a connection standpoint, we are more connected than ever in the world. Over 60% of the whole world has internet connectivity. And of those, a great majority have access to mobile devices. That means they're on-the-go devices where we're able to connect with people on a quick basis. However, mental health crisis has become a crisis, has been renowned. The world community has understood that loneliness and the percent of people that are declaring themselves lonely, anxiety, has increased like never before. Depression has increased by never before. It has been brought on by COVID, but it has stayed, it has lingered to the extent that mental health has become more than just, an overview. It's really a topic in discussion. In the UK alone, there's a huge campaign to address the issues that country's having from a mental health perspective. And more organizations are leaning to have these open conversations with their employees. The out of the economy, then, the quickness of technology has moved us with an experience. If I'm selling a toothbrush, I have the flexibility of personalizing, customizing not only the journey, the experience, but also the product itself, like never before. But that's leaving us in a very interesting space, because then that means there's more technology, there's more platforms that have to force to talk to each other. Interoperability has become a big challenge within our industry. And then we have the workforce, where again, automation is providing a force and a way to move forward, to progress, to expand, to grow. A lot of employees feel like they're getting left behind. In fact, a global study was released that approximately 54% of people are concerned about how automation, specifically artificial intelligence, will impact their day-to-day business, and specifically their own roles and their own jobs. And then lastly, from an insurance standpoint, we just spoke about the amount of data that us as an organization, as an industry, we have. It's more than ever before. But the economy to that is that there's more and more distrust in how consumers perceive brands using that data. So we have this issue where there's a lot of opportunities, but the marketplace is calling us and is making us pause and bringing the consciousness that something is just not right, that there's a major distrust that is happening. So the provocation of today's conversation is really having everybody in the room start thinking about, how do we go from guaranteeing the winning? This is what we've done for the past 10 years, especially in the digital space. How do we get the algorithm to predict faster, to move faster, to get better? And I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with winning. What I'm saying is that there's a calling today for everyone, for all of us. So us asking the question, what world do we want to leave behind? And it doesn't come at the consequence of growth. That's the big provocation today, that we can have this balancing of rethinking the way that we go to market, the way that we structure our MarTech, our technology, our strategies, with the way that we think about the consciousness of humanity, how we're going to leave behind for the next generation to follow. And this is where a lot of the principle of data ethics, and we are seeing a growth in data ethics emerging. The sense that more companies need to take accountability and understand the role they're playing in the digital ecosystem and beyond, and what are they leaving behind from a consumer perspective, and who is being left behind. This is very important. Now, if you're looking at me like, Mev, that sounds amazing, but that's an esoteric, broad thinking, and at the end of the day, I need sales. Well, hopefully this chart serves as a bit of awakening. Now, what we're seeing in the trends is a growth in regulation. This trend has been emerging for the last 10 years, but it's been accelerating across the world very quickly. And in the last, I would say 5 years, we're seeing more and more countries coming into regulation. India just passing this year the Digital Protection Act, which is reintroducing the concept of what regulation means for our business. Now, if we can take what we've learned in other much stringent countries, so if we think about the EMEA and we think about the US that have been extensively going into this trend with not only GDPR, but now in the United States, the California Protection Act, there's a lot of learnings that can garner. And one of the biggest learning is that the brands that are best assimilating to this new world are the brands that are embracing the consumer trends of people worrying about their data, worrying about the distrust that exists against companies, and the regulation that is starting to emerge blending it together to make that into a cornerstone, into an offering. And this is important because studies have shown that more and more consumers are becoming aware of the data regulations in the marketplace, but they are starting to take more action, becoming more what we call data privacy active. That means they're actively looking for brands that have this assurance in the way that they're taken care of from a data privacy standpoint, as well as they're much more likely to make a switch now more than ever. And that is really important because what this allows us to start thinking about is privacy as a competitive advantage. Integrity from a MarTech and data standpoint as a competitive advantage, as a guarantee to the marketplace. And when thinking about this from a consumer lens perspective, one thing that, again, this is coming from Cisco 2023 consumer survey that was released around data and data regulation awareness, is that if you think about the top 13 countries, 46% of consumers are very aware of privacy laws. And they feel very empowered when those consumers that are aware of, over 72% of them feel that they can do something about their consumer habits, as well as the way they approach their day-to-day, because they have this awareness, because they have the assurance of regulation. And when you look at India, one of the most fascinating stats is that among all the countries surveyed, 67% of the adults in New York market are very aware of the privacy regulations that have emerged. Now, many of you may say, well, yeah, that's true, Meb, because it was recent and it was majorly covered in the press. But still, if you compare that to Consumer Privacy Act here in the United States is faring out around 46% of adults that are aware of regulation. India, as a consumer marketplace, is very sophisticated, very aware. So as brands sitting in this market, this is an area where we really need to focus and start thinking about bringing that integrity into how we go to business and how we think about the digital ecosystem. And it's a perfect opportunity for ethical design, because what ethical design does is that it incorporates the human into the center. It starts making us to rethink about what are our use cases and what are our requirements and what is the impact that we're having, not just on the bottom line, but on the person. It gives us the ability to bring people back to the equation, so that when we think about the equation of profits, the percent that we allocate to people is much greater than what we design for others. And there's a lot of organizations that have been thinking about ethical design in technology as well as in AI. One of my favorites, and this is the construct that I use and I'm sharing with you, is the European Commission. And the European Commission's, from a design perspective, was designed with many experts around the field, and say, if we want a better tomorrow, we're designing these solutions, these systems, this connectivity, our AI opportunities around these 6 core areas. The first one is the respect of human autonomy, and understanding that from a right perspective, this matters, that we have to give the respect that humans need in order to bring autonomous decision-making. And you might ask yourself, well, don't we do that already? Because we give you could choose to pick our brand or not. But this plays a little bit more into the way that we create our algorithms. For a very long time, especially in the digital space, it has been about, and in the social space, about driving more engagement, driving more stickiness. And it begs the question, well, how autonomous is human decision when you're driven by an algorithm that's only showing you what you know that person's gonna see, and taking away potentially the ability of choice and the ability of finding out new opportunities. The second one is that when you're thinking about ethical design for these solutions, these platforms, we start thinking about privacy and data protection. And again, not as a reactionary, not just because now regulations here and I'm actually going to be regulated and monitored. but because it's the right thing to do. It's because my consumer base demands it of me. It's because at the end of the line, there is a child, there is a person who has the right to be protected from, and who has the right to remain private. There's sensitive information about people that maybe, just maybe, it's not worth for us to use within our algorithms. The third one is fairness. And fairness is something that, especially in the US, when thinking about not just our ecosystem, but even within our machine learning capabilities, has been a challenge, continues to be a challenge, which is how we address bias. And bias comes in many forms. But the most important thing here is to understand, how are we constructing a network and a platform that ensures that there's fairness of not only accessibility, but also fairness in the way that we're representing and accruing data. Well-being. This is the function when we really have to ask ourselves, not just as a marketer, not just as a data transformation, not just as a digital lead, not just as a MarTech specialist, not just as a data scientist, but going back to, how is my product, how is my design, how is my initiative going to leave this world? Is it gonna leave it better off than what I found it? Or there are potential consequences down the line that I have to start thinking about? Transparency. How much of what we're doing is a black box versus an explainable and has explainability, that not only your board can understand what you're doing, but also your key constituency, not just your clients, not just your customers, but also your employees. How transparent are they, and how transparent are you in the process of these designs, so your employees have fully awareness and understanding of what's driving the mission of your organization? And lastly, accountability and oversight. And this is so critical now more than ever, ensuring that at every step of the way of the process of how we're defining our systems and our solutions, we're thinking through of how we are taking accountability for the decisions that are being made. And the beauty of these core principles, why I love them so much, is when you're thinking about design, you're thinking about whether connecting technology, whether you're adding on artificial intelligence within your stack, whether you're using new advanced algorithms, where you're designing a product from scratch, whatever they may be. If this is a basic flow, but you can intersect those principles across the board. So even at the very beginning, the specification of objectives and what we're trying to achieve. At that moment in time, there's an opportunity to ask yourself, what are we building and what are the consequences? What could go wrong? There's a very interesting perspective that I have. There's a very, what I call negative person in our team. And I tend to be more optimistic. I tend to see more the opportunities, especially when we're building solutions. But the reason I love this person, bringing them into the fold, is because they're very transparent to start saying, yeah, but here's what could go wrong. And it's not to stump the progress, but it is to hold us accountable to start thinking about where we can adjust very early on. The same thing with data collection and prep. This is especially true when bias is truly manifested in the data that we're bringing into the fold, how we're collecting, how we're prepping. So all the steps along the way, there's a perfect opportunity for bringing ethical design into the equation. And the good thing is that if we're thinking about broad pictures and broad strokes, we're seeing how different companies are leaning into this. So when you're thinking about Respect Humanity's Autonomy, as an example, Anthropic is a major competitor to OpenAI. In fact, the founders came from OpenAI. And in the midst of everything that's happening in the marketplace, in the midst of you seeing OpenAI's success and introduction to Microsoft, and companies like Meta and Amazon, Salesforce, everybody getting into this pathway of growth, Anthropic is taking a pause. Anthropic, excuse me, Anthropic is actually just released a policy for how the steps they can take to proactively, excuse me, think about ethical design within their scaling solutions. And this is important because it's counterintuitive to the whole move fast and break things. Excuse me. The next one is we see this emergence of privacy enhancing technologies that are bringing into the fold that's really helping expanding our capabilities to enable privacy from a data sharing perspective and a data collecting perspective. And there's a lot of promise with a lot of the solutions. Federated learning, for one, is something that I get very excited about. For a quick explanation, federated learning is the idea that the processing power goes into the device, or goes into the browser, or goes into the client, but or I should say goes to the data, versus the data going into the processing. And that ensures that all protocols from a data standpoint are maintained. The other one that shows a lot of promise, you hear that in the marketplace, are clean rooms. They're not necessarily privacy enhancement technology per se, but they're playing to the field. They're applying a lot of these solutions into into their own stack. And then synthetic data gets me very excited because there's a lot of potential of not using all your data for modeling perspective, but creating new data sets that ensures the quality and the protection of your consumers. So there's a lot of exciting things and applications from a technology standpoint that we can start bringing in to apply ethical design. And then when you think about you're moving now into kind of the well-being side, in less than 450 days, the cookie will be deprecated. For those that are not necessarily aware, I know that Google made this announcement a long time ago, and a lot of clients came very cynical and skeptical of really will this happen this time. But Google is ensuring that the marketplace understands that no, the cookie would be deprecated, and starting January in next quarter of next year, we're gonna start seeing 1% of cookies going into the deprecation mode. And while a lot of voices in the marketplace are saying good things or bad things, the way that we're approaching this from an ethical design as EssenceMediacom is through Project Nova. Project Nova is accelerating the testing of the privacy sandbox and solutions in the marketplace. And the one key thing that drives us is the idea that it gives us the opportunity to create a digital ecosystem that truly works better for people. And if we have the opportunity and the chance to do that, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we start thinking about the well-being of the organization, of the full world, and do a small part to really ensure that the digital ecosystem is better? And in this project, we're ensuring that whatever we're learning is not just retaining to us, but that we're sharing to the community. Because part of well-being is sharing information and ensuring that the community is learning. Next, from a fairness perspective, I talked about how hard it is of automating fairness, and it is true. The good thing is that you have IBM and the FairLearn that are open source platforms trying to combat that, trying to provide solutions into the marketplace. And with fairness, I want to say that beyond having these tools for marketers and organizations to use to start incorporating into their data processing portion of the ecosystem, it's also important to understand what are the ethical committees that you're forming that can help bring the people back into the decision making, because that is very critical, especially with bias detection. And moving into the fairness front, I wanted to share this with everybody in the audience, because it's a great example of how fairness is not just addressing bias, but also accessibility. And one of our clients, Google, did this beautiful campaign, bringing in a very marginalized group of people, disability people, that don't have access necessarily to something as simple as selfies, and bringing that into the fold and into their design to ensure that this cohort is not left out. I'm going to play the video so that you guys can see the full rest of it.
As I read fashion magazines when I was younger, I always loved it, but I never saw anyone like myself represented. 96% of people with disabilities believe they aren't being represented well in the fashion industry. In parallel, when it comes to self-representation, their creative possibilities are limited by selfie form and function. So, when it was time to promote the Galaxy Z Flip 4 and its revolutionary hands-free selfie powered by Google Assistant, "Hey Google, take a selfie," we saw an opportunity to inspire people with disabilities and everyone else to expand their possibilities of self-expression. So, Google and Samsung partnered with ID, the first magazine to democratize fashion culture, and Refinery 29, a major female empowerment movement, launched Selfie Z, a magazine celebrating self-expression, shot entirely hands-free. Hey Google, take a selfie. Take a selfie. Where did a selfie video? Take a selfie. Sure. We handed the camera to fashion editors, model turned activists, photographers, and a movement director, inviting them to push the boundaries of their craft. Then we turned the set into a playground of creativity, building an inclusive experience in front of and behind the camera. You're able to see me the way that I see myself, through me being able to take my own pictures of me. No more outstretched arms that are uncomfortable. Instant photography allows me to open up my mind to see what is now possible. You will recognize your beauty and worth within yourself. We brought the content to life in print as a social-first series with ID's fashion DNA, and as a custom extension of Voices of Disability, an empowering original series by Refinery 29 that got a revamp. The campaign resonated deeply with our audiences. And above all, it turned selfies into a celebration of their full selves.
I love that video. I love that case. And again, it's a way where we're thinking about groups of people that have been marginalized for very long in different industries and places and spaces, and how we put them back to recognize. Lastly, I want to close with this before we go back to the broader discussion. It's something that we fundamentally believe in, and one that I want to wrap up with today. You have been exposed to amazing innovation that's happening in the marketplace. We have interesting conversations about privacy, and now more than ever, you're bombarded with news lines about generative AI. But the main key here is, just because you can does not mean you should. And it's time that we as a collective, as an industry, start thinking about how this ethics plays to our everyday ecosystem and what world we. Thank you.